Zoro is a boring character, but I believe that is intentional. Why? Because the funny part about Zoro that's actually quite genius is that he is the basis for all of the sword lore in One Piece. And then in tandem with that, you could also say that he is the basis for all the hockey lore in One Piece. Therefore, he remains boring because he is the base and the vehicle to drive all of these concepts, which in turn means you don't need to make him a devil fruit user. You don't need to make him a genetic mutant like Sanji. You don't need to make him a cyborg because there's so much sword lore present in the series. Even when you're talking about characters like Mihawk, Mihawk doesn't work unless you have Zoro present. Because Zoro, by just existing in the narrative, presents to the reader why swords are important and why swords matter. Therefore, Mihawk matters because Mihawk is the best swordsman in the world, which is what Zoro strives to be. Therefore, without Zoro, there is no Mihawk, which is why I think it's quite genius now that both of them are basically the same character now in the present story, both moving in lockstep, one striving to be the best while the other strives to build a family essentially. And spoilers for post Wano, but now Mihawk is a part of a Yonko organization in Cross Guild. So now he is a part of a crew for the first time in the series, as far as we know. So now he is building a family, whereas Zoro has a family, but is building to be the best, which I find that dance that the two find themselves in very interesting, which is why I say Zoro is boring, because he has all the tools needed to be interesting, and other characters in tandem make him interesting, because without him as well, we wouldn't even have Meito grade weapons. We wouldn't even know that weapons in One Piece are graded, which now so many characters rely on that system to further their own narratives and make their character and weapon lores even deeper than they already are. Whitebeard, Zebek, Zoro himself, Mihawk, etc., etc. All of this is based on Zoro meeting Tashigi in Logtown. So yeah, Zoro is important in that way as well, establishing that there is a whole weapon system in One Piece and weapons are graded. Therefore, that leads into the whole Black Blade concept, of which we still don't know a lot about, but that builds up Ryuma, and then that builds up Mihawk, which then leads into even more lore. But to continue, further on, and spoilers for Elbaf, just saying, when you come across characters like Roger or Zebek, anything they can do, Zoro could potentially do in the future. Any techniques that they potentially do, Zoro can end up doing. This goes for Rayleigh. This goes for Gaban in a way, because he is a axe user, so I guess you could say he's adjacent to a sword user in that way. Even when you're looking at guys like Whitebeard or even Big Mom, anything they do, Zoro can possibly do. And this is presented to us very clearly in Wano, because of course, beforehand we meet Kinemon. Kinemon has a fire rendering technique in which he can extinguish flame with a sword slash. Well, just by observing him, Zoro learns how to do that. So that's why I say, anytime you see a swordsman do something, it's a potential boost for Zoro, which is why he doesn't need all these extra lore bits to make him interesting, because in being the basis of swordsmanship in One Piece, anything a sword can do automatically feeds back into making him interesting, which is why I say again, keeping him boring was a very genius move by Oda, because you then can then build upon him by introducing other characters. So anytime you see a character with a sword, even Mihawk, it presents a very interesting thought of, okay, how is this going to affect Zoro? Even when you start talking about Haki, because quite interestingly, Haki is technically displayed through Zoro first, in a way, because you could also argue Shanks is kind of like that as well. But the reason why I think Zoro's a bit more important between Shanks and himself is because you actually see the development of Haki in real time when Zoro is fighting Mr. One. So he lays the groundwork for what then Shanks would become later on in the story when we see him fight in various situations. And then he becomes the basis for really making Mihawk start to make sense as the story progresses. And of course, he makes sense because everybody after Haki was fully introduced is a sword user for the most part. There are very few people who use their fists. A lot of people use weapons in tandem with Haki. So with him being that character to lay the groundwork, it makes a lot of sense for other characters to be Haki users who also use weapons. And in that way, you could also say he lays the foundation for this Haki in general, because we know now what it takes to develop it, and now we know what it takes to become a conqueror in real time, because that happens too to Zoro in the King fight. Even though Luffy develops it first, it's interesting to see it develop in the series in real time through someone who is not a captain, which is why I think Zoro's development of Conquerors is a bit more interesting than Luffy's, because now we get to see how that affects other characters, why that makes other characters important, and how that affects other characters who use weapons. So the twist now is that he could be laying the groundwork for Sanji to then build upon, so then they can remain equal, because that is another caveat to Zoro. He has to always be equal with Sanji. So I could see Sanji taking a different road and becoming a conqueror in his own right. But I do think Zoro establishing that non-captain characters can develop Conqueror's Haki is important, because we hadn't really seen that appear in real time in the series. We've seen other characters have Conqueror's Haki who technically aren't the captain, like say Charlotte Katakuri, but we haven't seen it develop in real time. So that's why I think his development is more important than almost anybody else in both developing Conquerors and, I would think, observation Haki based on the language used in the Mr. One fight. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video and weren't too put off by me calling Zoro boring, please give me a like, as I would greatly appreciate it. On top of that, if you really enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a subscription. But that is not all. Don't forget to click the bell so you never miss a Polyp Works video. And on top of that, if you were to be so kind, please click the hype button, because it does help somehow. However, with that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polyp Works.